welcome back to my channel. I thought I'd film for you today a bookcase tour. Here is my bookcase in all of its glory. I do only have this bookcase because I only keep books if I really love them, or if I just don't want a big gap in my bookcase. But I don't keep everything I get, so I'm not one of these people with hundreds and hundreds of books. At some point I would like to film a video about my journey to decluttering. But other than some cookbooks and a few books that we keep in our office, this is it. This is everything I own. There is a lot of traffic in here. Books come and go, so if I film this again in a year, it won't be the same collection anymore. This actual bookcase, a friend of mine made to my exact specifications because I was sick to death of bookcases falling apart as soon as I put heavy things on them. So first of all, one of the very few ornaments that I have in my house, this guy. So this is a seahorse that my mum bought on holiday. I think he's made out of a mangrove root. I did get rid of most of my ornaments, but this one the kids won't let me get rid of because this little penguin fella lives in the root and they like to fiddle around with him. Anyway, I'm going to move him out of the way for the purposes of this video so we can see the books. So first of all, on this shelf I've got my Jean Plaidy books. I think Jean Plaidy is an excellent historical writer. I first got into reading her books by reading Murder Most Royal. This is my favourite. This is about Anne Boleyn and Catherine Howard, and just amazingly emotionally written. This one is about Queen Anne, this one is about Marie Antoinette. The French Revolution is another period of history that I'm interested in, and Gaylord Robert is also about the Tudor period, but it's about Queen Elizabeth I. The UK price, 30 pence, so they're super old, but they're very good. Then we've got my Spike Milligan collection. I like Cocoon, it's an excellent book. The War Diaries, I liked the first one and then I got a little bit bored. I think I wasn't in the right frame of mind. I've kept them because I would like to have another go at reading those. Then we've got some New Scientist books. These are from when people write into the magazine and they ask a question and then other readers answer the question. They're usually funny. Mapping the Deep. This is a really good oceanography book. This is about how they figured out the map of the bottom of the ocean, basically. It's fascinating looking back at the history of science. As I've said before, I'm a big sea lover. This is basically a collection, well, a coastal memoir. There's no particular story to Land's Edge. It's sort of stories about beachcombing and living by the sea. Then I've got some travel guides, and they're probably out of date. You know, the Acropolis in Greece isn't going to suddenly disappear. So anyway, I kept hold of those because I would like to go back to these countries. Next we've got Wild Swans. This is an incredible book about three Chinese women, grandmother, mother and daughter, going from the grandmother who had sort of foot binding and that kind of thing to the mother who lived through communist China under Chairman Mao, and then the daughter who lives in America. It's a very emotional book, which was extremely popular probably about 15-20 years ago. Then we have The Princess Bride, which I talked about in my favourite books, because it's great. Lots of people have seen the film, maybe less people have read the book, and it's kind of a modern fairy tale, I guess, the best way to explain that one. Very good. Then we get onto these children's hardbacks that I have. These are just beautiful. This Peter Pan in particular with this picture on the front is lovely. And then these What Katie Did series of hardbacks. I've had these since I was a kid. I've read them gazillions of times. As you can see, the spine of Peter Pan is getting a little bit worn out, and hopefully my children will read them at some point. I mean, to be honest, I'll probably read them again at some point. The Handmaid's Tale I talked about in my January-February wrap-up. Pride and Prejudice, I like it, I've read it. I actually don't know that I would read it again, so possibly this is one that might go when I get something that I'd like to keep more. Lion I read last year. This, there was a film about it last year, year before, that is about a little boy who gets lost in India and doesn't know where he came from, and it's about his journey trying to find his home. I don't want to spoil it. There'd be too many spoilers if I go into any more detail, but well worth a read if you haven't. Emile by Jean-Jacques Rousseau. This is the English version. This I bought for a research project I did when I did my Masters in Education, because this book is about sort of the perfect child brought up in the perfect way. So Emile is this boy who is allowed to pursue his own education. It's a philosophical book that was published in the 1700s, but very interesting. These two I haven't read. I sort of tend to keep my TBRs at this end. My bookcase has got, each shelf is a slightly different size, so I can't keep them all together because it depends what size the book is. Okay, second shelf. The Knoll, I picked up in a charity shop ages ago just because I thought it looked amusing. It's sort of an environmental book where this little character is trying to stop environmental damage. And yeah, I liked it and I will read it again. And I mean, I don't really care that much that books are in tatty condition. I'm quite happy to pick things up from charity shops or wherever. You know, it's nice when you've got a book that's beautiful and in good condition, but I do have a bit of a mixture here, as you'll see. Then we've got Nancy Drew. I've had this since I was a kid, but when I was in Greece, we had lots and lots of the Nancy Drews in the place where we stayed. People had left them behind. And the group of us that were there, we read all of them. And we all had a good laugh about how she's so perfect and so beautiful, and I don't know, we just had a good time reading them. So actually this isn't one of the ones that I read in Greece, but it does still remind me of that time. You know, sort of, I like to reminisce. Little Women, which I've read hundreds of times and I'm likely to read again, and again I thought the kids might like that at some point. Mrs. Frisbee and The Rats of Nim. This was one of my favourites when I was a kid. I nicked this off of my brother, who's older than me, so this book is tired. And this is about a little mouse who goes to the rats to ask for help, and she finds out the secret of these very intelligent rats. The Weird Stone of Brisingamen, which is about a special piece of jewellery, if I remember rightly. I actually haven't read this for ages. Again, I hope that the kids will read that at some point, so I've held on to it. And Swallows and Amazons, which is about some kids who go and sail about a lot, really. Sort of an adventure book. Then I've got the Silence of the Lambs trilogy. I actually don't think I'll read this again. I have read it a number of times, read all of them, and at the moment I've really gone off of anything that's sort of too scary. I don't know, I just think this isn't really me anymore, and I don't know that I would actually read these again. So I don't want to leave a massive gaping hole in my bookcase by getting rid of them, but I think that these are on their way out. Next is Red Dog by Louis de Bernier. This is about an Australian dog, so a legend basically in Australia, and oh, it's just gorgeous, this book. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is also one of my favourites, the famous comic sci-fi. The Lord of the Rings series here. The Hobbit I actually haven't read for a really long time, so that's due rereading. I love this whole universe. So next up, these books were my nan's. She died just over a year ago. This is the only thing that I have to remember her by, so she was a very strict Irish Catholic, so yeah, they remind me of her. Next section is looking very, very tired. So Jaws, this is the classic story about the shark that attacks people. I'm not going to keep this. These James Bond books are my husband's, so not my decision as to whether they stay or not, and actually I haven't read them. I suppose I probably should. Schindler's Ark, fantastic book that Schindler's List was based on, about Oskar Schindler saving the Jews in Auschwitz. Mr. God, This Is Anna is a very interesting book. This is a religious book, I guess, but also philosophical. It's about a man called Finn who finds this girl called Anna. She's been kind of badly treated by her parents and living on, well, I think she run away. And him and his mum, they take her in and care for her, and she looks at the world in such an interesting way. I actually believe that it's never been proved for sure that this is a real story, but some people say it is, some people say it isn't. But it is so interesting, as I say, sort of in a religious basis and a philosophical basis. And I also have the companion book, Anna's book, which is her writings about her thoughts. I have Fish Face, which is, I guess, a coffee table book. It is literally pictures of fishes' faces, and I like it a lot. So we're on to the third shelf. These are really, really good chord books, the little black books. So I've got acoustic hit songs, more acoustic hits, and hit songs for ukulele, because I play guitar and a little bit of ukulele. Melvyn Bragg's Credo, this is an excellent book about Saint Bega in Ireland, who was an Irish princess who became a saint. Captain Corelli's Mandolin, this is a collection of stories that take place, fictional stories, that take place during the Italian occupation of Greece. The Life of Pi, another really well-known book. This, another one that got turned into a film actually. This is about a boy who becomes shipwrecked with a tiger. Next, the only Charles Dickens that I own. This I read last year, and it's called Dombey and Sons. and it's a kind of a feminist novel really, which I thought was very interesting. It's kind of as feminist as you get at the time, I suppose, and it's about this man called Dombey who is pinning everything on having a son to take over his business, and about how that works out for him. The illustration, I suppose, gives you a clue that, in fact, he has a very capable daughter. It was a very good book, although it took me a long time to read. At some point, I would like to make a video about my feelings about Charles Dickens. Then we move on to my Pratchett collection. Well, actually, this isn't all of my Pratchett collection, as you'll see in a bit. I've got a few of them. Obviously, I haven't got all the series. I mean, he wrote something like 30 books, I think. My favourites, Colour and Magic, The Light Fantastic, Reaper Man, Soul Music. Yeah, of those ones, those are my favourites, but these, I mean, they're so easily readable. Then we get onto a TBR section. I haven't read any of these, so Alone in Berlin by Hans Fallada, I don't know how you say that. I haven't read any Bernard Cornwell's. This is The Pagan Lord. Douglas Riemann, A Dawn Like Thunder, Robert Harris, Archangel. This I want to read this month, so hopefully this will be in my March wrap-up. The Book Thief by Marcus Suzak. I put this on my Instagram, which please follow me on there if you don't already. People came back to me saying this was really good. I got messages and I got comments on my my Instagram, so that is one I want to look at soon. I Am Pilgrim by Terry Hayes, I haven't read. Unbearable Lightness of Being and Atonement, I haven't read either. On this shelf I've got this little fish dish, which is, I guess, the junk dish. So in here I've got some lip balm and a nail file and some screws, again maybe less handy, and a bit of blue tack stuck to a breast cancer pin. Excellent. Yeah, well, so much for being a minimalist. Well, I can never really describe myself as a minimalist. Here we've got Braids, Buns and Twists. This is just a really handy how to do hair book. Then we get into my sort of parenting and breastfeeding section. So if we start with The Ultimate Breastfeeding Book of Answers by Jack Newman and Teresa Pittman. This I have not used as much as my other breastfeeding books. It's still good, it just hasn't got as much that I found useful. Next up, The Womanly Art of Breastfeeding. This is, I guess you could say, the breastfeeding Bible. It takes you through every eventuality that could crop up during breastfeeding and, you know, tells you what you can do. I hesitate to call it a how-to book because breastfeeding doesn't really work like that, but it basically goes through how you can deal with different situations, and it's excellent. Then we've got Is Breast Best? This was published by Dr. Joan Wolfe, who I saw doing a talk a long time ago now. I brought the book because I was interested in what she had to say. She is a detractor of a lot of breastfeeding research, and claims basically that breastfeeding has very little benefit for babies. Obviously I don't agree with an awful lot of what she says, but there are some things that are very interesting, and I think it's always important to read the opposing view to what you're interested in. The Politics of Breastfeeding I talked about in my 5 favourite books. This book was life-changing for me. Sorry if you can hear the baby, she's woken up now. Microbiome Effect. This is a book that is, I suppose, a companion book to a film that came out called Microbirth, and it's essentially looking at the importance of establishing microbes in a new baby and the place of breastfeeding and birth in that. Very, very interesting research ideas in that. How Mothers Love, I saw Naomi Stadlin talk at a conference. She was talking about a book to do with grandmothers, actually. I don't think she was talking about this one. She's better known for the book What Mothers Do, but this is also very, very good. Breastfeeding Uncovered by Amy Brown. I talked about one of her books in my January-February wrap-up. This is kind of another political book. The No Cry Sleep Solution by Elizabeth Pantley. This is a well-known parenting book. I personally prefer gentle parenting, so this has been helpful with coming up with ideas of how to deal with my children when they refuse to sleep. Unlatched is another sort of political book looking at controversies surrounding breastfeeding. I really like this book by Jennifer Grayson. The only criticism I would have is that it doesn't have an index, which, because I tend to use these books for reference, I found that slightly irritating, but it's a good book nonetheless. 3 in a Bed is a superb book about bed sharing, but also looking at the history of how human infants have slept. This book I talked about in my January-February wrap-up, Why Starting Solids Matters. The Name of the Wind I've actually not long finished. This will be in my March wrap-up by Patrick Rothfuss. This is a fantasy book, and I don't want to say too much more because I'm going to talk about that in an upcoming video. Here I've got a guide to an art exhibition I went to called Still Lives of Europe, and a book about music theory because I keep planning to improve my music theory knowledge. I have not read that yet. Moving along, Captain Blue Bear is, I suppose, technically my son's. Well, I mean, it was mine, I bought it. I probably wouldn't keep it because I have read it, and when I've been reading it to my son recently, I found it a bit boring. I enjoyed it the first time I read it, but not so much now. Moving along, you can see I've got 2 more Pratchetts here. Basically, these don't fit with the ones on the shelf above. Jingo I really like because I've travelled a lot in Saudi Arabia, and so this is kind of about a fictional Arabian country, so I find this interesting. I didn't like Flood that much, to be honest. I just haven't got rid of it. Sorry if you can hear my washing machine spinning. That's really annoying. Honestly, I have tried to film this video. This is the 3rd, 4th? I don't know, the time I've tried to film it, and every time the baby's awake or something happens or the footage is not right or whatever, but I will film it this time, regardless of spinning washing machines and awake babies. Wave, baby. Where's your hand? Ah, baby hand. Anyway, Birds of Prey is kind of a swashbuckling. The Mating Game and Lucy Shaw's Not Sure. I talked about this in my January-February wrap-up because that's when I read it. It's the first book of the year. And The Mating Game I read last year. These are both published by the publishing company that my literary agent runs. The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up I talked about in my favourite books. I've already said a few times, interested in ideas about minimalism and decluttering. The Book of General Ignorance, this is based on the TV series QI, so it's lots of just facts. What If is based on the webcomic, which actually I didn't read, but never mind, XKCD. It's kind of strange questions, what if this happened, and giving scientific answers. So to give you an example, let's find a random page. How high can a human throw something? So then it goes into lots of detail using physics. I've got a couple of diving books here, so Dive Kent and Dive South Devon, because these are 2 of my favourite places to dive. Then we've got Red Sea Reef Fishes. I used this a lot when I dived in the Red Sea. It's waterproof as well, so I would use this, you know, come up from a dive and you could flick through it even though your hands were wet. A Walking Book of East Kent. I have not used this book, but maybe I will because I have a dog and I live in Kent. This is another TBR on the, like with the others, it's on the right hand side, but because it's larger it didn't fit with the others, so I haven't read that. Lustrum by Robert Harris. This is down by the side of my armchair, so it's a little bit dark down here. I've got a little pile of books here. They're not mine, so if I put them in with the others, then I will forget that they're not mine. The House, which is a library book and part of my book club, so I'll be reading that this month, so that'll be in my March wrap-up. And then these ones, which I borrowed from my mother-in-law. I've never read any books by either of these authors, so I was interested, and so I borrowed those off of her. So this is actually a photo album. Then we've got a signing dictionary. I do baby signing with the baby, who is currently trying to grab the tripod. You'll notice this bookcase has got a wooden lip here. Some of my taller books don't actually come out unless I take the smaller books out. I don't mind because it's these bits here help to give the bookcase a bit more strength, and I do have some really heavy books on here. Then I've got some guitar books. So this is the Student Repertoire by John Mills. This is a really, really good classical guitar book that kind of increases in complexity as it goes through, but the pieces are beautiful. I also have Node, oh, they're the wrong way around. Anyway, Node, let's swap them. Node Book 1 and Book 2. I used these when I was first learning to play the guitar when I was a kid. I did do karate for a bit, 12 years. I haven't trained since my eldest was little, but these books are written by my first karate instructor, who's called John Van Wienen, or Sensei Van Wienen. I should have got these signed, I never did, but he wrote these books. They're basically pictorial guides to any part of Shotokan karate. So then, just a handy mammals book about general land mammals instead of my usual fish mammals, but next to it we've got fish mammals. They're both Dorling Kindersley guides, I think. Are they? Oh no, this one's Collins. Three Before Breakfast is a very interesting book. It's a very old book about 3 British naval cruisers which were all sunk within an hour, as it says on the front, by a German U-boat. And story has it that my great-great-grandfather was aboard all 3. Basically sunk on one, picked up by the next one, sunk on that one, picked up by the next one. I don't know that that story is necessarily true, but he was definitely on the HMS Abuka, which was one of those cruisers. So I actually haven't read this yet. I should. The Writers and Artists Yearbook, which is useful for anybody who is a writer or an artist. This is just handy reference about agents and publishers and that kind of thing. I've got the complete illustrated works of Lewis Carroll and the complete illustrated stories of the Brothers Grimm. They're both from the same series, both hardcovers. Kids will like to dip in and out of those, so I've kept hold of those. I had those when I was a kid. Moving along, we've got the Games of Thrones books. I'm missing the first one because I lent it to somebody. I have read one more, I think, beyond these, possibly two more. So anyway, at some point I'll revisit these. I haven't read Dan Brown's Inferno. I should. I've read a few of his other books and I liked them. Then we get to the religious section, I suppose. Junior Praise, I've been in a lot of church bands and this has just been a really handy kind of chord book. Oh, I missed out. I've got the Good News Bible, which I bought because my original Bible is this, which my dad bought me when I was christened. It's inside this box. It's a leather Bible with kind of gilt pages, and my dad bought me this for my christening, and I really love the King James version in terms of just literary value, I guess. I just love the flow of the words, of the ye olde, I'm going to put that away in a minute, ye olde English, but realistically I wasn't getting through it because, you know, it's hard work. So I bought the Good News Bible in the idea that that was going to mean I was actually going to read it. I have not. And then this massive Bible is my daughter's. My mum wanted to buy her a family Bible like my one. My one's got sort of family records in it, and my mum wanted to do the same thing so she could do kind of births and deaths and all of that written in it. And my mum ordered this and did not realise it was going to be so enormous. The inside, hang on, I'm doing this one-handed because I've got a baby in my hand. It is, ooh, it's illuminated. It's very nice, thank you Mum. It's a bit heavy. Then we reach my bottom shelf, which is where I keep my biggest books. This is where this wooden lip is going to become even more difficult because an awful lot of these books don't come out of here. This black book over here is called Desert Sea. I'm not going to get it out. It's got pictures of fish. It's very nice. The invertebrates is, funny enough about invertebrates, basically it describes the features of all different ones if you wanted to identify them. Seaweed ecology and physiology, it's about seaweed. This is these are good descriptions, aren't they? This series here, which are published by Blackwell's, they were kind of affordable marine biology type books. So I only have two from the series: ecotoxicology, which I was fascinated with when I was at uni, and marine ecology, which I also liked. They're excellent, very readable, which I would definitely read again. This one here is a photographic guide to sea and shore life. This has just been handy for rock pooling and that kind of stuff. Similarly, this one, Great British Marine Animals, also good for that, but this gives you a little bit more information about the ecology of the animals. Coast, which I talked about in my January-February wrap-up, I finally read, which is about the coast of the UK. Practical skills in biology, which is just really handy as a science teacher, and also when I was at uni, which is when I actually bought it. This marine biology book is a really good overall, loads of information about all different parts of marine biology in it. Really good book. Then I've got marine mammal biology, again, does what it says on the tin. Then I've got some David Attenborough's. I believe I've read both of these, but I would like to have another look because I'm not sure if I have, and I'm not sure how much I want to keep these two. Undersea Britain by Rob Palmer. This is quite an old book. I bought this when I was a teenager and I was getting interested in marine biology, just to learn a little bit more before I went off to study it. It's an excellent book about the marine biology of the UK. Life is a really good general, just biology book. It doesn't come out. If I want to take this out, I have to take all of these out and lean it over, but anyway. And similarly, Introduction to Genetic Analysis. Everything you ever wanted to know about genetic analysis is in here. It's a really good book. And moving along, still in the science section, Microbial Life. I was really interested in microbes when I was at uni, marine microbes. Obviously, since I'm more interested maybe in the birth world, but still, I think this is a very interesting area of science. This one, Introductory Oceanography. Again, it's about oceanography. So a big section I've got of marine biology type books from when I was studying it, but they are still books that I use, that I reference every now and again, and I love them. They're nice, and they're hardbacks, and they're just, yeah, good. Then we get into crafting. So I've got Beastly Crochet, little characters that you can crochet. This is a book on crocheting that doesn't come out. I've got some cross-stitch books. So this one is just sort of pretty pictures. And this one I have used so much. Anything you ever wanted to cross-stitch is in this book. From a beaver to a knight to many things. Anything you ever wanted a pattern from is on there. And then I've got more. I've got farm animals, birds and butterflies, and fairy tales. So I do like to cross stitch. It's handy to be able to reference these things. Then I have knitted food, felt, all sorts of things. This is really, really good actually. I've used this a number of times to make presents for people. I've got animals in cross stitch. I'm not going to keep all these cross stitch books actually because I don't use all of them. Compendium of knitting techniques. This is handy if something comes up that I don't know how to do, and if the internet isn't that clear on how to do it. Usually I just go to the internet. This is my kids, 365 things to make and do, sort of kids crafting projects. Knit vintage knitting patterns, it's very nice. Knitted wild animals, I have made most of these. They're brilliant, my kids love them, and yeah, good presents for people. And I have another one in the series, which has gone the other side of this, which is knitted dinosaurs. Same kind of thing, they're really, really good. Then this book, Bare Reality, it's 100 pictures, if I remember rightly, of women's breasts, and along with their stories, the women's stories, not the breast stories, I suppose it's the breast stories. Oh man, this is a really emotional book. I suppose it's a coffee table book. It depends how you feel about having pictures of boobs on your coffee table. The lady who wrote this, Laura Dodsworth, has since brought out a book about men called Manhood. Finally, I've got in here just two things I was published in. I was published in the Journal of Human Lactation. I wrote a letter to the editor, that's in there, and I was published in an Association of Breastfeeding Mothers magazine, so I've popped that in there as well, because you know, if you're in black and white, you've got to keep it. And that's all of my books. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you again for more soon.